There are several members of the Republican caucus who don't want to work those extra hours. So the reason this isn't happening isn't because of Democrats. It's because of Republicans who don't want to work a full-time job here in Washington, D.C. to do the work that is required for their roles as senators. In the meantime, you know, Congress isn't doing what I think Congress ought to be doing on a whole host of other issues. I highlighted earlier that Congress has virtually zero interest in this election integrity fight in California, where Republicans lost 2 seats. It's not because I'm concerned because Republicans lost seats. I'm concerned because I think congressmen who shouldn't have lost seats due to the illicit counting of ballots received after Election Day. And in the Senate, there's another crisis going on. It's called the confirmation crisis, or I'm calling it the confirmation crisis. I issued a tweet the other day, which got a lot of attention. Confirmation crisis over, that's probably over now. Almost 100 Trump nominees for key positions await floor votes in the U.S. Senate. Conservatives pushing hard for Leader Thune and Senate Republicans to start working harder to get them confirmed. So let me give you some background on that. So what happens when there's about, it's well north of 1,000 nominees the president needs to make and get confirmed by the Senate in order to fully staff the political appointments he has authorizations to make. Now, to the Senate's credit, they're actually powering through at the committee level, getting a lot of these nominees out of the committee. So there's typically a committee vote, and then they move forward to the floor for a full vote by the Senate. The challenge is the Senate isn't voting in a timely way on these nominations, the full Senate. And it's all the fault, to be blunt, of the majority leader, Mr. Thune. Because he sets the schedule. Now, Democrats could make it a lot easier. That's true. But if the Democrats are going to make it harder, it just means the Republicans have to work harder to get the nominees confirmed. And one of the biggest problems is the Senate doesn't work full-time. So the show is airing on Friday initially, right? Senate isn't here on Friday. Are you working today? I noted earlier today the Senate isn't. Why? Because it's Friday, and the Senate doesn't often work on Friday. I was going to say rarely, but I'm sure someone on the Senate would say it's not rare. Most of the time they're gone on Thursday afternoons. I think they left, I think the Senate adjourned, I checked this week on Thursday at 3. Typically they adjourn midday on Thursday. They come in, essentially they work 2.5 days a week, to be clear. So it's no surprise that 100 nominees are floating around out there unconfirmed. So we complain about the deep state. We complain about DOJ not having, not having enough cuts in place or finding enough to cut. Well, the president has people who can help, and the Senate, controlled by members of his own party, aren't sending them along. So conservatives are getting up in arms about this, and I think voters are too, because now we're educating them. This initial, I don't know what my initial tweet, what did the initial tweet get in terms of views? Can you figure that out? I think it was like 500,000 views, which is pretty big. And I've been telling people to call their Senate, call their senators to let them know what they think. And I encourage you to do that. Do you think the Senate should work full-time? Maybe even overtime to do their job and provide advice and consent on Trump's nominees? 782,000. Yeah, so this initial tweet had 782,000 names, views. So it means that people are a little bit upset. They're kind of upset about it. Usually tweets of mine go viral because someone gets mad about what's in them. And you can call your senators to share your views on this issue by just dialing 202-224-3121 and tell them you want to speak to your senators. You can provide your state name. You can actually go online and figure it out directly as well. Calling has an impact. And call the majority leader. Call Thune's office. And conservatives aren't, and by conservatives I mean movement conservatives. As president of Judicial Watch, I'm involved with some coalitions of conservative movement groups and leaders, activists, people from the Hill. You can imagine. And you know, I'm there for Judicial Watch. I'm not terribly political in that regard. You know, you listen about some of this legislation going on, and you know, I'm not a budget guy. You know, I just don't. I know that you spend too much money, you usually end up having too much corruption. That's my rule of thumb from Judicial Watch's perspective. But you know, we pay senators to work, right? And they're not working. And here's I highlighted a memo that many conservatives had signed as a follow-up, not as a follow-up to my tweet, but I was highlighting what conservatives were saying in my tweet. And let's go to the tweet where I had the conservative leaders quoted in their memo. Dozens of conservative leaders signed a memo on the confirmation crisis. And this is the text of the memo. Conservatives urge Senate Republicans to prioritize and swiftly confirm the president's nominees. There are close to 100 presidential nominations now pending on the Senate's executive calendar, which is like the general floor calendar. And each of them is vital to the president's ability to carry out his agenda. The president is making dramatic change in Washington, doing exactly, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lesson the conservative movement learned acutely during Donald Trump's first term. The president's appointees are vital to ensuring the president's agenda is carried out, as we say, such as ensuring that the permanent bureaucracy does not undermine him. Through bipartisan actions taken in 2013, 17, and 19, the filibuster no longer exists for presidential nominees. And most of the nominations currently pending on the calendar, neither does the post-cloture 30 hours, which essentially is 30 hours of debate before a nominee is voted on after debate ends. So it's kind of a confusing issue, but 30 hours can take up a lot of time, but it's very limited. I think it's 2 hours now in terms of debate requirements on the Senate, assuming the Democrats want it like that. Let's go back to the tweet. The Senate could easily confirm dozens of nominees a week if they chose to work a full 5-day work week between the hours of 9 and 5. So we're not even asking for overtime. The current Senate work week of 2.5 days a week, Monday evenings through Thursday at 12, means the Senate sometimes confirms less than 5 nominees a week. This current glacial pace means that future nominees will experience months-long delays and the president's agenda will suffer for it. There is no excuse for the repeated delays and slow pace of Senate confirmations. Democrats can no longer block or obstruct nominations, and very little time must elapse between invoking cloture, which is essentially ending debate, and confirming a nominee. The missing element is the will of the Senate Republican Conference to stay in town and do the work. We urge them to act with all urgency and haste in completing the basic responsibility of the Senate. President Trump's agenda depends on it. So I think their paychecks ought to depend on it, right? They're not working. We pay them to work, they're not working. And to be clear, it's Senator Thune who has the authority as majority leader to keep the Senate in session, more or less. And he's not doing it. And he promised he'd be doing it at the beginning of the year. Beginning of the year when he came in, he committed to having the Senate in session more. And he did for a period of time, but that's fallen by the wayside. Now, I understand he's the leader, right, of the Senate, but he's not necessarily the king of the Senate. And he's there because of the support of his caucus, the Republicans. And there are several members of the Republican caucus who don't want to work those extra hours. So the reason this isn't happening isn't because of Democrats. It's because of Republicans who don't want to work a full-time job here in Washington, D.C. to do the work that is required for their roles as senators. I mean, the president now has put forward several, it's at least a dozen, I think, judicial nominees. They're going to be acted on by Chuck Grassley's Judiciary Committee pretty quickly, I suspect. So the issue is not going to get better. It's going to get worse unless Senator Thune and his colleagues in the Republican caucus commit to working a regular day for at least a few weeks. I mean, I'm not asking them to do it every week for the rest of their term. Just get through these nominations. And frankly, there's lots of other things to do. They could be investigating corruption, figuring out why the FBI tried to destroy our republic, figuring out why the Justice Department tried to jail a president on a pretext, figuring out why President Biden's gang tried to suppress the First Amendment rights of hundreds of millions of Americans, figuring out why there was an invasion, getting some accountability there. I don't know. If I were senator, I'd think of things to do. There's a lot to be done, and they don't want to do it. You know, so when Musk complains about the Senate or debt, it's like the challenge is they don't want to do any work. I mean, forget about the policy. They just don't even want to deal with the issues because it takes time and energy, and they'd rather be home. Now, I exaggerate because not every senator's like that, and some of them are pretty smart and are workhorses. But institutionally, it's lazy. The Senate's lazy. The House ain't much better. So anyway, that's my little mission for you this next week. So next week, call your senators and let them know what you think about their failure to move quickly on Senate nominations. The president's doing his work. He's putting nominees forward. The Senate is failing the Republic and not confirming and not doing their work. And maybe they don't want to vote for these people. Maybe they're all bad and they want to turn them aside. Well, then do that then, so the president can put someone else in. Just get the process done. Get the process done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.